He was just standing there, 82 years old, fingers resting on the wooden edge of the casket that held his wife of 57 years. When the officer barked, "Move it, old man," and without warning, fired a taser straight into his chest, Isaiah Trenner's frail body crumpled onto the gravel, glasses shattering, dignity stripped beneath the weight of loss, and 50,000 volts. But Isaiah didn't curse, didn't scream. He just reached once more, trembling, toward Loretta's coffin, like love could still anchor him. That's when the hum of engines began. Not sirens, but something deeper. And 5 minutes later, the street would fall into a silence no badge could command. Because when the Marines came, they didn't knock. They stood for one of their own. This isn't just a story about power. It's about the kind of respect no uniform can demand. Only earn. If you still believe honor doesn't age, and silence can speak louder than commands, stay with this story. Comment honor if your chest tightened in that moment. And if you're someone who still believes in standing for those who stood for us, you'll know why this story must be heard. Isaiah Trenner was 82, but his posture still carried the echo of parade rest, spine straight, chin level, hands always folded behind his back, like he was still waiting for orders. His skin, dark and weathered, bore the sun-etched creases of years under open skies, and his silver hair was always combed precisely to the left, no matter the weather. He dressed like time hadn't moved. Starch-pressed slacks, buttoned shirt, jacket folded neatly over his arm even on warm days. A man of discipline, not nostalgia. Every morning he brewed his coffee in a dented steel percolator and placed one extra cup across the table. For Loretta. It had been 3 years, and he never missed a morning. He lived alone in a one-story clapboard house on the east side of Tallahassee, quiet, unremarkable. His closest neighbor, a mailbox, and a tree. Isaiah didn't talk much, but when he did, his words came like carved wood. Deliberate, measured, firm. He'd served 30 years in the United States Marine Corps, fought through Khe Sanh, dragged wounded men from burning jungle soil, and never once mentioned it unless asked. His medals were in a shoebox. His scars were beneath the sleeves. The grocery boy called him Sir, but the bank manager barely glanced at him. Once a delivery man left a package marked "Fragile" upside down at his door. That morning, as he dusted Loretta's photograph, the phone rang. "The funeral's set, Mr. Trenner. We'll see you at Green Hill at 9. The woman's voice was polite, distant. And when she hung up, Isaiah held the silence for a long moment, then reached into his drawer, pulled out the flag she'd folded years ago, and laid it across the bed, just to make sure it still fit. Under the pale morning sun, the funeral procession rolled quietly to a halt at the gates of Green Hill Cemetery. The gravel crunched beneath the hearse's slow tires. Isaiah stepped out first, shoulders squared beneath his dark coat, eyes locked on the casket through the tinted glass. Loretta, wrapped in the same silence that now blanketed the small crowd behind him. There were no loud cries, no grand gestures, just the low murmur of grief, and the wind brushing through tree branches like breath withheld. He placed a steady hand on the polished wood. A moment. Just one. Before they took her from his reach forever. That was when the police cruiser screeched to a stop. The young officer, Officer Chadwick Reeves, stepped out with the kind of authority born not from experience, but from unchecked confidence. Sunglasses mirrored, uniform spotless, voice already annoyed. "Sir, you're blocking access. Move the vehicle and step aside." He didn't ask. He commanded. Isaiah turned, slowly. Lips parted to explain. "My wife." "Don't care who she is," the officer cut in. "You're obstructing. You've got 60 seconds before I start writing tickets." Mr. Malik Dawson, the funeral director, hurried over. "Officer, please. This is almost over. Just give us a moment." Reeves raised his hand, silencing him like a schoolteacher scolding a child. "That's not how this works. I said move. Isaiah didn't move. Not out of defiance, but because grief had rooted him. His fingers reached back toward the casket. One final touch. One more second. That was enough. You're resisting, Reeves snapped. He reached forward, grabbing Isaiah's arm. The old Marine's voice was a whisper. Don't touch me. Not a threat. Not even a plea. Just memory speaking, from somewhere deeper than years. Reeves didn't wait. The taser crackled. A sharp, unnatural hiss against the stillness of the morning. The shot hit square in Isaiah's chest. A gasp rose from the mourners. Then, silence. His body convulsed. Then crumpled. Hard. Face to gravel. Glasses spinning. No one moved. Mr. Dawson shouted. He's an old man. He's burying his wife. But Reeves barked back. He resisted. Situation's under control. Isaiah lay there, limbs trembling. The scent of scorched air and dust sharp in his nostrils. Blood on his tongue. The weight of shame far heavier than the taser's sting. No one stepped forward. No one helped him up. And then, a vibration. Not sirens. Engines. Heavy. Rhythmic. Tight. Deep beep. Still distant, but growing. Reeves turned, puzzled. The crowd looked down the road. And Isaiah, still curled on the earth beside Loretta's casket, closed his eyes. Because he knew that sound. He'd ridden in one just like it. 53 years ago, in a different uniform, for a different kind of farewell. And the moment Officer Reeves turned back, that was when the street began to change. The gravel still trembled when the first black SUV rolled into view. Silent, polished, unhurried, its engine humming not with speed, but with certainty, like it already knew where to stop. Mourners turned as one, necks twisting not out of curiosity, but as if some deeper instinct told them to make way, to bear witness, to hold their breath. The second vehicle followed, darker than the first, windows tinted so deep it reflected only sky. Officer Chadwick Reeves stepped back without realizing it, hand still hovering near his belt, unsure whether to call for backup or apologize, though it was already far too late for either. The front door opened with a quiet click, and when the man stepped out, no one spoke his name. They didn't have to. The space around him adjusted like it recognized a shift in gravity. Colonel Mason Briggs moved with a weight, not of body, but of history. Every inch of his tall, squared frame, marked by 30 years of command. The kind of presence forged in places where silence falls before orders, and men follow without asking. His dress blues bore no wrinkle, no excess, no softness. The eagle on his collar didn't shine, it stared. His boots struck the ground with measured intent, not aggression, but control. Every step saying what his mouth didn't. I am not here to negotiate. His jaw was set, his eyes narrowed, gray like weathered steel, focused not on the officer, not on the crowd, but on the single man lying beside the casket of a woman who once sent both of them letters in the same week, decades ago, when the war was too loud to hear your own thoughts. He didn't rush, didn't ask, didn't even glance around. His path was already drawn, in memory, in blood, in the silence between two men who had buried more than one brother. Isaiah still lay curled against the dirt, breathing shallow, his left hand twitching from the aftershock. But he lifted his chin when the boots stopped in front of him, and their eyes met. Not in reunion, but in recognition. Mason said nothing. He simply knelt, bent with the precision of a man who'd folded flags and carried stretchers, and extended his hand. No ceremony, no speeches, just a firm grip that pulled Isaiah up with care disguised as ease. Only then did Mason turn. His hand remained on Isaiah's shoulder, steady like a post in a rising tide, but his gaze shifted, slow, deliberate, until it rested on Reeves, who stood paralyzed, taser still in hand, mouth slightly open like a man who had just realized the door behind him was no longer an exit. The colonel didn't raise his voice. He didn't even frown. He just asked, soft, like a fuse being lit. Which one touched him? No answer came. It didn't need to. Because as the second SUV door opened and two more men in full dress stepped out, their faces unreadable, their posture immaculate, their silence louder than any siren, every witness in that cemetery understood. Whatever force the badge once carried had just been replaced by something older. Something that didn't ask for permission. And when the last Marine shut his door behind him, not a single footstep echoed, because even the ground knew. It was about to remember. Under the moss-shaded oaks that lined the path behind Loretta Trenner's casket, time itself seemed to brace. The air thickened, heavy as velvet, as Colonel Mason Briggs stood tall, unmoving, facing the man who just minutes earlier had driven a current of electricity into an 82-year-old veteran's chest without hesitation, without apology. Without apology. Officer Chadwick Reeves straightened, tried to find something in his posture that might pass for confidence, but the shift in his weight betrayed him. The way one foot slid half an inch behind the other, like instinct, was already looking for a way out. For a moment, there was nothing but the two of them, and the silence that pulled tighter with every heartbeat. No crowd, no cemetery, just a man in uniform, and a man who'd abused its meaning. Reeves scoffed first, sharp and fake, like glass against glass. "So what? You're here to play bodyguard for the old guy," he muttered, lifting his chin, trying to sound amused but overshooting into arrogance. Didn't know funerals came with military escorts these days. Mason didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his coat, slow, deliberate, like he was pulling memory itself into daylight, and drew out a phone. No unlocking, no searching. The screen was already glowing. He held it in one hand, turned it around, and let the silence carry the weight of what was playing. The footage was grainy but clear. Bodycam timestamp, sound intact. A single push. A taser snap. Isaiah's body dropping to the ground like a flag cut loose from its pole. Gasps from behind. One. Up. Then none. And the sound stopped. Mason didn't look at the screen. He was watching only Reeves. "You said he lunged at you," the colonel said, voice low and hard as stone. "You filed it. That's perjury." Reeves opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Look, hey?" The words fell apart like wet paper. He looked around. No help. No partners stepping forward. No crowd backing him. Even the funeral director, Mr. Dawson, had taken a step away. Mason stepped closer, just one pace, but it landed like a hammer on Reeves' breath. "You want to know what a dishonorable discharge looks like," he whispered, not as a threat, but as a certainty waiting to be written. Reeves didn't answer. His face, moments ago curled with mockery, began to stretch taut. Jaw tight, nostrils flaring, eyes darting not in defiance but calculation. Behind his badge, behind the starch of his uniform, something shifted. Not fear, not yet, but the flicker of something that always comes before it. Recognition. The silence held longer than it should have. A car horn honked far off down the road, but no one looked away. Then Mason lowered the phone. He didn't put it away. He just let it hang by his side, glowing, waiting, undeniable. And in that stillness, without another word, the officer who thought he could bury a man's dignity beside his wife's casket finally blinked. There was no need for drama, no raised voices, no grand confrontation, only the quiet unveiling of truth, louder than any shout could ever be. The video footage from Colonel Mason Briggs passed hand to hand with growing urgency, now played in full view on the screen of Deputy Harris's phone. There it was, grainy but unmistakable. Isaiah Trenner, standing motionless in his Sunday best beside a casket, lips trembling with grief. And then, the crack of a taser. The sudden jerk of his body, the way he folded like a man already carrying too much weight. He hadn't resisted. He hadn't raised a hand. He had simply existed. And that had been too much for Officer Chadwick Reeves. The footage looped again, and this time no one looked away. The crowd that once whispered now stood frozen. Mr. Dawson, the funeral director, removed his hat. One of the younger Marines near the entrance took a step forward, hands clenched. A ripple of discomfort passed through those gathered. Unspoken, undeniable. Reeves opened his mouth. That video doesn't show everything. He was being disruptive. You mean grieving? Deputy Harris' voice sliced through the air, low and controlled. You mean honoring his wife? He wouldn't comply. And your response, Harris continued, eyes never leaving him, was to drop him on sacred ground. There was no accusation in his tone, just judgment, and the unbearable weight of the truth now too heavy to deny. Reeves tried to speak again, but the words tangled in his throat. His confidence evaporated like steam, replaced by the stammer a man realizing he'd crossed a line no badge could protect him from. I thought he— You thought wrong, Harris said simply as he stepped forward, producing a pair of polished steel handcuffs with the same steadiness a priest might lift a chalice. And now you answer for it. The sound was surgical, cold, final, metal clicking around wrists that had once held power like a weapon, now limp with the weight of consequence. Isaiah watched in silence, not with triumph, not with vengeance, but with something heavier, a grief that had grown roots beneath his skin, deeper than any taser could reach. As Reeves was turned to face the crowd, his gaze darted, seeking rescue, alliance, mercy. He found none. The usher who once looked away now stood firm. A woman near the back whispered, "We let this happen." Even Mr. Dawson, who'd stayed silent for too long, took a step aside, as if physically separating himself from the cowardice of inaction. The officer was led past the casket, his footsteps echoing louder than the earlier commands he had barked. And as he drew near Isaiah, the old veteran didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't gloat. He simply lifted his eyes and spoke once, so quietly the words felt carved from stone. "You disrespected my wife." Reeves blinked, jaw tight, lips trembling now. Not from defiance, but from something far lonelier. Shame. And then came the final image. A patrol car rolling away, red and blue lights muted by the sun, a man inside shrinking into silence while a crowd once passive now bore witness. No one clapped, no one cheered, but in the stillness there was justice. The street outside the funeral home remained still, as if even the breeze held its breath. Officer Reeves was gone, but his echo lingered, not in noise, but in the silence that settled over the crowd like dust on old flags. Isaiah Trenner stood quietly by the hearse, one hand resting on the polished wood of Loretta's casket, the other holding his cane like it was the last piece of the world he still trusted. No one said a word. No one dared. Then something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't planned. But one by one, eyes that had looked away began to look back, not at Isaiah, but inward. Mr. Malik Dawson, the funeral director who had watched everything unfold with a nervous distance, stepped forward, slowly. He didn't speak. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a clean white cloth, and gently laid it beside Isaiah's trembling hand, the same hand that had been cuffed moments before. A whisper broke the silence. "I'm sorry," someone said. A woman near the chapel door, her voice breaking like brittle glass. She didn't move closer. She didn't need to. Her words floated, raw and real, settling into the cracks left by years of quiet complicity. Others followed, not with speeches, not with noise, but with glances that lingered too long, with nods that said, "We saw it," with steps that brought them just a little closer. One elderly man removed his cap and bowed his head. A young father lifted his child so she could see the flag on Isaiah's shoulder. And near the corner, an off-duty Marine in jeans stood at silent attention. Isaiah didn't react. Not with a smile. Not with a word. He simply looked up at the flag waving above the chapel. Half-mast now, by someone's quiet decision. And blinked slowly, as if tasting the moment for what it was. Not justice, but beginning. Colonel Mason Briggs didn't say much either. He stood nearby, arms crossed, presence solid as stone. But when his eyes met Isaiah's, something passed between them. Something old and unshakable. Not forgiveness, not pride, something simpler. Recognition. Isaiah finally spoke. Just once. "This wasn't about me," he said, voice rough but calm. "It was about what we let slide. Until someone couldn't anymore." No one answered. They didn't need to. The silence that returned wasn't empty. It was reverent. And as Isaiah turned back toward the casket, placing his hand over Loretta's with a tenderness no badge could chain, the air shifted again. Softer now. Heavier. But cleaner. Maybe it was the way the sun caught the corners of his worn uniform. Maybe it was the sound of boots scraping gravel as townspeople stepped forward to carry what the law had dropped. But in that quiet hour, something in that town remembered who they were supposed to be. And maybe, just maybe, they'd start living up to it. The bar never said sorry. It didn't put out a statement. There were no cameras, no ribbon cutting, no speeches. But a week later, when someone walked past that old doorway on Main Street, they noticed the dusty neon sign had been scrubbed clean. The front window, once smudged and cracked, now bore a quiet display. An American flag folded in a triangular case, a Purple Heart replica placed beneath it, and beside them, a black and white photograph of Isaiah Trenner in uniform. Eyes sharp, jaw set. "Younger uniform?" Eyes sharp, jaw set. No one announced who had set it up. Rumor said it was the young bartender. Others said it came from the local veterans post. But no one touched it. No one dared. It stayed there, still, proud, silent. Inside, something had shifted too. The stool Isaiah once occupied remained empty, with a single worn cap hanging on its hook. A small brass plaque was mounted into the wood, reserved. Always. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, people began coming back. Not for drinks, but to stand, to look, to remember. A middle school teacher brought her students during a field trip, gesturing to the photo with reverence. "He used to sit right here," she'd whisper, "and none of us even knew." A local reporter wrote a short piece. It went viral, not because it was loud or angry, but because it was honest. Just a headline. "The man who never raised his voice." From then on, people stopped laughing at the faded jackets. They held doors longer, looked veterans in the eye. A teenager who once mocked the old-timers began volunteering at the VA diet. Change didn't march, it echoed. And Isaiah? He never told his side. Not once. He still walked to the diner every Sunday, same time, same table. Still folded his napkin, still looked out the window like the town wasn't watching him. But now, they did. Not out of pity, out of respect. One morning, someone found him sitting there already when the doors opened. He was staring at a letter in his hands. A child's handwriting, shaky but sincere. It read, "I want to be like you when I grow up, not because you fought, because you didn't yell." Isaiah smiled, folded the letter with a precision that came from a different time, and placed it gently in his coat pocket, next to the medal he never wore. Then he stood, nodded once toward the picture in the bar's window across the street, and walked into the morning. No one said a word, but everyone stood, and the silence felt like honor. The booth in the far corner hadn't changed. Same worn leather seats, same flickering bulb overhead, casting long, lazy shadows across the scratched table. But this time, it was just the two of them. Isaiah Trenner sat on the left, hands resting calmly on a paper cup of black coffee, steam curling like silent breath. His son, Marcus, across from him, leaned back ever so slightly, his fingers drumming once against the rim of his drink before going still. No words came at first. They didn't need them. The quiet did the talking. Outside, the town went on, unknowing, uncaring. But in here, time felt slow, thick. A faint hum of jazz from a dusty wall speaker filled the air like memory. Something from the 60s. Maybe Coltrane. Isaiah's eyes didn't look at Marcus. They looked past him, beyond the window, to something distant. Something only he could see. And then Marcus broke it. Not loudly, not sharply. Just a ripple across the still water. "You okay, old man?" The question hovered, not really asking, not really needing an answer. Isaiah turned slowly, the corners of his mouth curving. Not a smile, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached down beside him and lifted the old Marine cap, creased, frayed, still carrying the smell of sand and salt and time, and handed it across the table. Marcus didn't take it right away. He looked at it, then up at his father. And in that second, it was as if years of silence, of distance, of unspoken expectations, melted into the space between them. His hand finally moved, firm but reverent, accepting the cap not like an object, but like a vow renewed. They sat like that a while longer. No need to fill the silence. The clink of a spoon in a ceramic mug, the soft thud of a chair scooting behind them. Life moved, but the moment stayed. Isaiah lifted his gaze toward the flag outside the diner window, its edges fraying slightly in the wind, but still flying, still proud. His voice, when it came, was nearly a whisper. "Didn't think I'd need you again." Marcus didn't reply. He didn't have to. Instead, he reached forward, placed a hand, broad, steady, on his father's shoulder. Just that. And when they stood, it wasn't dramatic. No eyes turned. No music swelled. Just two men rising, one older, one stronger now, walking toward the door side by side. The cap now worn on the younger man's head tilted just slightly forward, like memory leaning into legacy. It started quietly, like all things that matter do. Not with headlines, not with banners, but with a question whispered in the back row of a high school civics class. Who was Isaiah Trenner? A girl had asked it, pointing to a clipping taped beside the classroom clock. A black and white photo of a man standing alone at a funeral gate, hands by his side, eyes forward. The teacher didn't answer right away. He walked over, touched the edge of the paper, and simply said, "That's a story worth listening to." From there, it moved. A pastor brought it up one Sunday, just a passing mention before his sermon. But the room went still. An old barber down on 5th Street started offering free cuts to veterans again. And in the public library, tucked between worn copies of history books and folded flags, someone had placed a handwritten card. Isaiah Trenner sat here every Thursday, reading quietly. He taught us what silence can mean. Teenagers who once mocked the old Marine Memorial now stopped to brush the dust off its stone. A boy on a bicycle hopped off to fix the flagpole rope that had snapped in the wind. A girl stood beside her grandfather at the bus stop and didn't look at her phone, not once. At the diner, where it all began, people now held the door for older patrons without needing a reminder. Isaiah never spoke of it. He didn't post, didn't preach, didn't smile for cameras. But his story traveled without him, carried by those who saw, who heard, who couldn't forget the way he stood, and didn't flinch. Marcus, his son, Never told the full version either. He didn't need to. His uniform, pressed sharp every Sunday, spoke enough. His voice when he taught the young recruits held a weight that didn't come from rank, but from watching a man survive without shouting, endure without needing permission. And so the name Isaiah Trenner became more than a man. It became a pause in conversation, a glance toward the flag at half-mast, a quiet nod across generations. People didn't worship him. They didn't need to. They just remembered, and remembering changed them. A young boy in the school hallway stopped before a wall display. There, pinned beneath a glass case, was that same photograph. The same man. I see. Still standing. The boy didn't say a word. He looked, and looked, then reached out, not to touch, but to straighten the corner of the paper that had curled slightly from age. The story was still moving, still breathing, still being told. The diner door swung shut behind them, and for a moment, everything stood still. No dishes clinked. No voices murmured. Just the sound of a flag flapping outside in the morning wind. Soft, steady, like a heartbeat. Isaiah Trenner didn't raise his hand, didn't bow. He simply paused near the threshold, one hand resting on the counter, eyes scanning a new brass plaque, now fixed to the wall. It bore his name, no rank, no medals, just 7 words. He stood when others stayed silent. Someone in the back whispered his name. A waitress stopped pouring coffee. Then, as if choreographed by dignity itself, one by one, the crowd rose from their seats, not with applause, but with silence. A silence that spoke of regret, of gratitude, of change. Isaiah turned to his son and said quietly, "One day when they look at you, make sure you've lived in a way that doesn't need explaining." And with that, he walked out into the light, step firm, shoulders straight, the breeze catching the edge of the flag as if saluting back. Some legacies don't ask to be remembered. They simply refuse to be forgotten. If this story touched something in you, comment on or below, so others know they're not alone. And if you believe stories like Isaiah's still matter, subscribe now, and help carry them forward.